everyone. Welcome back to another 11:11 hour Tuesday Night Live. As we wait for people to jump on board, I just wanted to remind everyone about our 11:11 hour collaborations. So with Mother's Day coming up, there are some really cool items in our store, which you might be able to see. I'm wearing one right now, which is a Fantasy by Kate macrame necklace, which is amazing. I love it. There's also time to enter our 11:11 hour Autism Awareness Month giveaway. It's just a really simple thing to do. So if you go to the 1111hour.com website, you can catch on to how to do that. And there are 3 great prize packs, actually, which are full of sensory items, which you'll love. So hi, Amanda.
Hey, Tabitha, how are you?
Good to see you again.
It is, and a big hello to everyone that's catching this as a live and those as a replay at 11:11 hour.
Yes. So you can find all our stuff on YouTube or Spotify, which is great after the event. So if you can't make it on the night, that's totally fine. So tonight we're going to be talking about podcasting, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And, I was thinking a bit about this today, and I thought maybe you'll be talking about things like how to create a podcast, but also maybe about sort of what to podcast about, like content creation, repurposing your content perhaps. What else was I thinking? Like if you've got an existing podcast, just, doing a few improvements, whatever is not working for you. Hopefully you can ask a question to Amanda tonight and she'll be able to help. So I'm going to let you go for it, Amanda. I'm going to leave, but it's so good to have you back. So thank you for presenting.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. For those that are catching this for the first time, hi, I'm Amanda. And for those that have been here before, welcome. I'm just in the process of sharing my screen with you. So bear with me. Here we go. So a little bit of a different approach, but I felt that for podcasting, it's really helpful to have a little bit of structure when it comes to, how to start and how to grow your podcast. So I'll start with an introduction with regards to podcasting. So I called it, 0 to multiplying, because you're starting from 0 with your podcast and you're multiplying. Your downloads will increase, they will go up, they will begin to multiply. So how to use your podcast for networking and growing your business as a service provider. So whatever kind of service you currently have, you can use a podcast to network as well as to grow your business. So a little bit about myself when it came to, getting to where I am right now with having a podcast. So for those of you that I've met before, you may be familiar with my story, with my journey. And for those I'm meeting for the first time, this will be brand new. Welcome either way. So back in October 2019, I moved into a new role in marketing and fundraising, known as Gifts and Wills, bequest, and working part-time. And then, a few months later, we all sort of know, what was happening in the world at that time. I had been doing some ad hoc resume writing, and from there I decided to start an online business with career coaching and working with a coach at the time. Come sort of fast forward to August, so 2020. At that time, I was heavily into spirituality, new age, healing modalities such as Reiki. And so my business pivoted into new age, so offering those kinds of services, which I did for a couple of years. Fast forward to pretty much late last year, but officially from January 2023. January 2024 is when my business totally changed without offering any of new age teachings, practices, and it's all around business when it comes to your social media, business coaching, and I do still offer career coaching as well. And so in between that time, in January 2023, I decided to create a podcast. I'd had a calling, but a feeling, an inkling, just these reminders that a podcast and being an audio-visual person. So if you're an audio-visual person, you'll be naturally drawn to podcasts. And so I finally took the plunge and reached out to, I went with a podcast host to start mine, you don't have to, and created a podcast called Voice of Soul with Amanda Nicole. In total, I've recorded 15 episodes of that. The first few episodes, so the first 7 episodes, were predominantly New Age teachings in spirituality, and that M is meant to be manifestation. They were my first few episodes, and during that time, and we'll get into it more in this live stream and ask as many questions as you like, your first few episodes is where you're finding your voice. It's where you're finding your way to podcasting, how you communicate, how to get your message across, that sort of thing. So being patient with yourself. And then the following 8 episodes, all business-centric, so around your marketing, your sales, your systems, your pricing, your networking. And from February of this year, I did start actively networking with my podcast. And I know someone asked a question around, how it can help you with your business, and we'll go into it more here. Podcasting is a great networking tool, and I actively started promoting those business episodes as well. And so from those early days of like 0 to a few podcasts, I remember my first 10, up to 340 over 9 months. And that's all organically, that's purely through promotion, marketing, which we'll dive into. So that's just a bit of a bit of a recap and a bit of a summary into that. And I'll get into the how a bit more, and by all means ask your questions. But those downloads increase through sharing podcast episodes on other people's platforms, like in their stories, their emails, on their socials, as well as sharing. You can share your podcasts in other online communities. And even when some people reach out with inquiries into your DMs, if it's, how did you start your coaching business, and it's a genuine inquiry, then, you can actually, send them a podcast as well as a voice note. So feel free to pop any of your questions up as we go. So why podcasting? I wanted to start there because podcasting is a great marketing tool for you and your business. And it allows you to share your voice, your opinions, your expertise with people. You're knowledgeable, incredible things, you're well-versed, you've got great experience, wisdom, talents, and podcasting allows you to share that through audio with a community that you will grow and cultivate. And, you'll have regular listeners. You won't necessarily meet them, but they'll be out there listening to your podcast episodes, recommending them and passing them on. But with podcasting, you're quickly going to become a leader, an authority, an expert in your area. And people want to hear the way you share your message, your opinions, your expertise, the way you do it. You could have 2, coaches with podcasts on business coaching, and their delivery, their speech, their content is going to be different. Yes, similarities, but people want to get to know you. With podcasting, you're going to develop your speaking skills and refine them as you go. Each episode, you'll learn more about your podcasting skills and you'll become gentler on yourself, but you'll also start to refine those skills so that your podcast episodes become, super easy for people to follow, listen to. When I first started, I, rammed everything into those podcast episodes, but as you go, you learn to filter that and find your own way. Along with, sharing your voice, your opinion and your expertise, people actually get to know you, the real you. They're going to get to hear your quirks, your jokes, your nuances, how you share, teach and mentor on the topics that you're teaching, sharing and educating people on. and they'll get to see you, particularly if you have a Zoom aspect to it or a video aspect, and they're going to get to hear you as well. And that's without any forced conversations. You're going to be more in your natural flow through podcasting as you speak about and talk about those areas that you have wisdom, talents, and expertise in. Your podcast is really easy for people to listen to while they're doing life. So, you've got priorities outside of your business commitments, family, other, commitments that you do have. And a podcast episode, think of yourself when you listen to podcast episodes, they're really really easy to listen to when you're doing other things, whether you're doing your cleaning, your cooking, driving even. Like, podcasts are very versatile and easy for the listener to access at any time. They don't have to schedule a time to sit down and watch a training session such as today. And thank you so much for those that are here live and those that are catching this as a replay, if you're sitting down and watching this or watching this as you go about your day. With a podcast, you're creating assets for your business for years and downloads to come. So your podcast episodes, once they're loaded up on Apple or Spotify, it's permanent. You don't have to worry about social media blackouts, any of that. Your podcast is there. People go searching and looking for topics, and your area, your expertise is an area that they want to know more about. And when you think about when you do research yourself for a podcast, it's the same for your listeners as well. You having a podcast makes it easier for you to approach other podcasters and to be a guest. You can do swaps, and it's just much easier when you're approaching a podcaster to be a guest when you have your own, because you know and understand what podcasting is about, how to share episodes, why to share episodes, to keep sharing episodes, that sort of thing. So it does actually build instant trust with your audience, with your community, when you have podcast. Question, sorry, I missed that. If there was one before it, please pop it back. What is an ideal podcast length? That's a really great question. Ideal podcast length. My podcast coach told me around, 25 minutes is ideal. But at the same time, I've seen podcasts that are much shorter, like 8-15 minutes, and much longer as well, like 40 minutes. And some of my earlier ones were definitely 40 minutes. But around 25 minutes is a good amount of time for you to deliver the value, the expertise, the wisdom that you have. And for the person listening as well. So 25 minutes is around about time. But at the same time, if you are actually creating a podcast and recording a podcast regularly, and when I say regularly, like every week or maybe even more regularly than every week, it might actually be easier for you to do an 8 to 15 minute episode, but you're actually bringing them out regularly. So your listeners are actually receiving them regularly, but they're just receiving like a surefire, a solid, 8-15 minutes, but your next one's coming out in a few days or within the week. So, that's where it can shift and change when it comes to podcast length. But great question there. And you can start to grow your email list through podcasting and I'm getting my words tied. That's why I'm often better, freestyling, but I do like to, have a script from time to time. But to grow your email list, you can do that through your own podcast and being a guest on other people's podcasts as well. So people are going to come to your opt-in if you have one, a freebie, a free training, and sign up for that. When you're a guest on someone else's podcast, your call to action, your next step can be a freebie that you have, whether it's a masterclass, a training, a workbook, whatever it may be. But that freebie is an easy way for the listener to take that next step with you. And at the same time, you're growing your email list and community. And it's someone who is really interested because they've listened to the podcast in its entirety and they've actually then taken the next step of signing up for your freebie. So that in itself, builds a lot of trust, and there's an easy way to grow your email list. When it comes to starting your podcast, starting where you are, wherever you are in terms of your tech ability, you'll be able to find a way to start a podcast, whether that's, like I said, on your own, through apps, or with some hired help, whether you go podcast coach, whether you go a virtual assistant, because many virtual assistants do offer podcast management. So yeah, you can choose what you would like to do there. And I know Zoe Woods does video and podcasting. So if you are looking for some hired help, you can also, get in touch with Zoe as well. I know she certainly helps with the podcasting here at 1111. So things you don't need to start a podcast. You don't need your big fancy luxe microphone. I simply started with a Zoom recording and a headset. You don't need a fancy studio where you can record your episodes in. You can do it in the comforts of your own home, your study, wherever that may be, even on your couch. Had a client say that she's actually recorded hers while she's on her couch through her phone and her earpiece there. You don't have to have previous podcasting or presenting experience, so you don't have to have been a radio host or a previous, presenter or had a podcast before. And you don't have to be, super knowledgeable in your tech know-how, provided you're willing to start, ready to start, and maybe you're looking at some hired help, then you can begin straight away. But remembering you don't have to have hired help as well. Things you do need to start a podcast. We'll go into those. Oh, great question. Do you think a podcast can help a business? Absolutely, Penny. Yeah, it certainly can. And we're about to dive into that. To give you a quick sort of overview, it'll help with your networking. It will help with your marketing. And that has a beautiful flow-on effect. So it certainly does. And so what you do need for starting a podcast is that burning desire to share your message and expertise, sharing that with those that want to hear about it, know about it, be taught on it, mentored on it. That's what you need to start a podcast, that willingness to actually start one and take action, and take, clumsy, messy action. Like I said in the beginning, your first few episodes, your first 3, 5, 7 episodes, you'll go back and listen to them and go, oh, wow, that was interesting. But you're just finding your feet, you're finding your voice, you're finding your message, you're finding your expertise. What you do need is a laptop or a smartphone, and you can also use apps as well when it comes to your podcast, and a host as well. So there's Buzzsprout as well. And having faith, courage, bravery, patience with yourself, and resilience is really mostly what you'll need. So what you can see there's not a lot of tech need to start a podcast. It's actually about your passion to serve, your desire to help people. Maybe it's your preferred way of communicating. So starting a podcast is that way. Thanks, Wilma. How often should you podcast to access a following? What's your suggestion? Yeah, how often? Continually, definitely aim for your first 15 to 20 episodes, and look at releasing those on average every 2 weeks. By all means, you can certainly do it weekly, but having that regular flow, and also pre-recording them in advance, because you might be like, whoa, I've got to get a podcast episode every fortnight. That may actually work for your schedule, but what you can do is pre-record those episodes in advance. So say your first 3 episodes, that's what I did, and then you can release them each, say, week or each fortnight. Mine came out every fortnight. And the reason it stopped is because I'm going through a refresh and a rebrand. And also at the same time, I wanted to continue to promote the episodes that I've already created, particularly the business ones that can actively help people as well. So yeah, you've got those options when it comes to your podcast. When repurposing small sections from a longer episode, how do you decide which sections to use for the smaller clips? Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, listening back to your episode, or maybe you print out a transcript and you can see where that piece of content, that smaller piece of content, is best suited. So maybe you've listened back to your episode, or you've seen a printout and you're like, oh, that particular mantra or saying or the way I frame that's really good for a quote. So I can create a Canva graphic, I can put my own quote in, and you could write a bit about your podcast episode, or just direct people to your podcast episode as a call to action. Maybe you've gone back and listened to it, and there's a particular question, for example, that you've addressed. Well, that could be a post in and of itself. Potentially it could even be something that you create into a lead magnet. So whether that's an ebook, for example. So by looking at over the content, you get a feel for where it's best placed, whether it's some that you want to take across and pop onto your stories. Maybe it's a piece of, a question you've answered, or some wisdom that you've shared that you bring across to your email. So you can pop the actual written content, I say written content, but it's come, say, through your transcript, but you can put that content into written forms across your platforms, on your business page, on your personal profile, on your Instagram, wherever you're hanging out. Maybe it's LinkedIn. So it's great for repurposing your content with your podcast, is having those transcript notes and popping that content in different places and spaces, and that'll save you time as well. And then your listeners, your community, your audience, that repetition is actually working to your advantage, and for them as well, because remembering that we often need to see things many times. I think the touch points were like 6 and 12 in marketing, but now it's well up to the 20s. So having your content in different places and spaces, you can use that repetition to your advantage, and your community get to know, like, and trust you a lot quicker, particularly when it comes to trust. So you're welcome, Wilma. Yep. Hi, Mobina. Should we do a complete written script before recording the podcast, or should we do a random, natural-looking podcast? What do you suggest? This is a great question. I'll answer it straight up and then I'll go into more detail. You can do both. I did both. When I first started, it was literally just, I'd already decided on the topic, and then I'd go for a walk, get out in nature, have a think about the things I wanted to say. I'd come back and literally in a journal, I'd just write down the main points, like say 3 to 5 main points, and have a call to action, and I would record my podcast that way. This is earlier on. Other times I would just, this is the topic, and I'm just going to let what needs to come through me in terms of teachings, and remembering you have wisdom, talents, expertise, and knowledge. So you'll probably be quite surprised, and you can reward yourself and give yourself a pat on the back in terms of acknowledging what you do know. It'll actually start to flow through very easily. If you're someone that reads well off a script without people sort of noticing, without tripping up on words, then go with the script. So for anyone who's been following me for a while, you generally would have noticed that I don't tend to have slides. There are some workshops that I do, and the more detailed they are, my words get a bit tied up, and it has happened a couple of times or a few times here already. So that's a really great question that you asked, because you'll find your own way. If you're great with scripts, you'll run with scripts. If you're more, intuitive, flow-based, but need some bullet points, some key points, then you'll go with that. And you can, mix it up as well. So it really does depend on your style of communication and how you find you best communicate when it comes to a podcast and with audio. So networking, podcasting is gold for networking. It's such an easy networking ask. It's so easy to approach people that you know, business owners that you've worked with, that you've referred, you've recommended and shouted out for various services that they may offer. It's easy to then follow up with someone and say, hey, I've got this podcast episode on this particular topic, ensuring that it's actually valuable to their community, and then asking them to share it, and then leaving it up to them as to how they do it. They might pop it in their stories for you. They may pop it on their socials. They may put it in an email, but it's an often overlooked area, and people are so happy to refer and recommend podcast episodes. So that's where it can really grow your business in terms of networking and marketing. Your podcast is going to do the legwork for you in terms of the actual topic, but it's an easy way to create meaningful connections and build relationships with people, because that podcast episode that you're offering to a complimentary business owner is a topic that's of value to their community. So that's an easy share. And there's no ask for, hey, have you got some clients for me? So it removes all that stickiness and ickiness around, asking people for actual clients. It removes all of that. So that's where it can really grow your business. Also, too, as another form of networking, over time, you can start to invite people onto your podcast, or maybe that's how you begin your podcast. Hey, Mabina, thank you. I'll definitely try the journal thing. Yes, if journaling is your way, then run with that. You'll be amazed. Ideas will come through for you when it comes to topics, when it comes through, ideas will come through for episodes as well, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, definitely journal on it, and a lot will come through for you when it comes to the creation of your podcast, the recording of your podcast, and also the promotion of your podcast as well. And so you can invite people onto your podcast. So with the next iteration of my podcast, I will be having guest interviews as well. But when you're starting out, it's often easier, although it may sound hard, to actually go it yourself, because then people get to know you. They get to see you as the expert, as an authority in that area, as a leader. But if you're super keen to start a podcast, and for you it's about connections and it's about interviewing people, then start there. Like, you can do either or, but if you really want to fast track, being known in the online space or in your industry, then going it alone in terms of sharing your wisdoms, your learnings, the lessons, mistakes, things you've overcome, then going solo works really well as well. And so also too, as a part of networking too, you'll start to receive messages, whether that's in person or in your DMs, Messenger. I've had people approach me and say that they listen to my podcast and it's been so helpful when I've met them at events. So it has that flow-on effect. You don't see all this happening, as in when you create your podcast, you create it, you bring it out into the world for the people that you're here to serve and share your message with. And it just has that beautiful ripple effect, which is really quite freeing, because whilst you don't know what's happening, you can just trust to know that you are expanding your coast, that you are expanding your influence and your reach through podcasting. And receiving messages from people where they've shared with you, hey, I've written a review for your podcast. And they're great networking asks as well, where you ask people if they would leave a review for your podcast. So that's where it really feeds into your business when it comes to growing your business. And it has that compound effect over time. You're just like I'm now starting to see the fruits of my labor through podcasting. I didn't see it, in the early days. It was happening, acknowledgement of downloads, celebrations, that sort of thing. But the fruits really do start to come when you say the course and continue to promote and share your podcast and network with people as well. So, the next one we've certainly touched on and gone into. When it comes to marketing, you become known as an authority in your field. People get to know you for the things that you share, the topics that you talk on, teach on, speak on, that sort of thing. In terms of your marketing, it's going to nurture people. People are going to get to know you, like you, and trust you. And so you're going to build up what you call a listenership. You might be like, hey, what's a listenership, Amanda? And it was like a podcast coach who told me that. She'd been in radio, and she said that you build up a listenership. That's your community, the people who listen to your podcast. So when you're creating your podcast, speak into the topics that you're here to speak on, but to one person, to one listener, like you're having a conversation with one person, and that one person, really does connect with that, and it has a beautiful ripple effect. But that's how you nurture your listeners. People will refer to you, like your podcast is having a ripple effect. I remember a slightly different example, but relevant to podcasting, being at the sauna. And in the sauna, there were two men talking about podcasts and what they listen to. And it was a reminder for me at that time to actually start my podcast because I'd been putting it off. And so people are often speaking about podcasts, the ones they listen to, what they learn about. Like these two men were saying, how much they enjoyed listening about this particular topic, which was all about nutrition and personal training. And they said it's like, having the opportunity to have a private conversation with them. Obviously, in the podcast, you're listening to what the podcast is sharing on, but that's where it nurtures people, and that's where people will refer on your podcast and also recommend them. And in turn, it leads to sales. Like the natural flow and effect is sales. It's the marketing, the networking, the nurturing of people. And then in time, that then flows, and it's about staying the course with your podcast. Like a podcast is more of a long game for you and for your business as well. So, as I shared with you, because you're sharing your podcast, people are familiarizing themselves with you. And so they get to know you as well. And they're also getting to know you in other people's audiences as well as your podcast is being shared. Going back to one of the questions with regards to repurposing content, your podcast episode can be repurposed, used in other forms of content like quotes, smaller pieces of written content across your socials. You can turn it into a blog. So you can run that transcript, edit it, and there's your blog. And you can release a blog every week, every fortnight, every month, whenever you release your podcast. So that's where you can start to see through podcasting. It really does feed into your business model, whatever kind of service provider you are, it feeds into that, and it helps with your marketing and your networking as well. You can also share your podcast with your email community. You might be like, well, hey, Amanda, my email community should know about it. Well, maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. But at the same time, they may be busy. But, you can repurpose your podcast episode through sharing it with your email community. And you can factor that into your email communications once a month. That was something that I would do. I would share the most recent episodes, and that particular email was actually all about the podcast. That's really clever, using the transcript as a blog post. Yes, absolutely. So run your transcript, excuse me, turn it into a blog, and then you've got your blog. Like you don't even have to worry about what to write. Like it removes any worry, any angst, any doubts that you may have, or just the thought of having to sit down and write a blog. You're like, well, hey, I've created my podcast episode. I'll run the transcript. I'll edit it. there's my blog done. So you're saving time as well. You can share your podcast into local community groups and groups like Help Me Build My Business Australia. Yes, absolutely, Tab. Yeah, that is actually how I've grown, predominantly how I've grown my podcast when it comes to downloads and people sort of becoming aware of me, how I can help them when it comes to particularly the business episodes, when it comes to starting a business, when it comes to pricing, boundaries, systems, that sort of thing. It's an easy share. And yeah, in Help Me Build My Business, you have that opportunity to share it. So being aware of group rules as well. But a podcast is really easy to share. In most groups, obviously, you need to check the rules. You can easily share that. When someone asks a question, you can address the question and then say, hey, I've got a podcast episode on it, and then include the link. So provided you're allowed to include links in groups, see, you're starting to see how this all fits into your business model when it comes to your marketing, when it comes to your networking. So that's easy for someone. I literally did that last night in a community group that I go into. And someone actually asked about starting a business. And so I addressed their question and then said, hey, I've created a podcast episode on the 10 steps to starting your business, and popped in the link. And, you just trust and let go, surrender that. And people come across those links. The person will listen to it as and when. So that's where you can really, I say, blow up your podcast, but that's how you can grow it, through sharing it in community groups. It's a free resource for people to access straight away. I'm very passionate about that particular topic point, but that's how you will, if there's one thing that you take away from this when you have your podcast, is to share it in groups. And it's easy to share other people's podcasts in groups. So, for example, going off track a bit, but related to the question, so maybe there's a peer that you have, or a business owner. I'm thinking of someone that I met online. We haven't met in person yet. She's based in and around Geelong in Australia, and we will be connecting up soon. But that aside, she has a podcast about motherhood and the well-being of motherhood. Now, they're not questions I are quick to answer, but when I've seen someone asking about that and where I felt that it was suitable and relevant, I've said, hey, such and such, you could connect with her. She has a podcast episode, or she has a podcast on, motherhood and well-being. Here's the link. So you're actually helping someone, as in the person who's asked the question, and also you're sharing that podcast for someone else as well. So people in your network, you can share it with. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but you can just say, hey, I've come across this podcast, someone that I've worked with or that I know, here it is. And you pop the link in and it's easy. So that's where it really does help your networking and your marketing as well. And going back to that question around popping it into community groups, and that pretty much covers this point, that where you go into community groups and answer questions, you share the link to your podcast or someone else's. You can just share their link, and all good, provided it's, group rules appropriate as well. So, this is where it really does help you grow your business, having a podcast. So, like I said, with sales, that certainly comes. That'll come through people listening to your podcast, people recommending your podcast, and it's just a natural byproduct. Starting a podcast, if you move away from like it's going to lead to sales, yes, it will, but rather than focusing on that, if you come in with the focus, the intention, the view that having a podcast, I can share my message, my expertise, I can help people, I can complete the mission that I'm here to complete. It's going to help with my networking and marketing, which in turn leads to fruit, which in turn leads to sales and the multiplying of sales. It's the natural byproduct, because if you just jump straight to sales, then you can lose sight of actually all that nurturing that we've talked about today in this live stream, all that nurturing where people are getting to know you, like you, hear from you, recommend you, all of that. And it's easy to do, particularly when you're starting out in business. You're like, yeah, I want to make sales. But remembering that networking and marketing are generally what leads to sales. And so by being open and willing when you start your podcast, or maybe you've got a podcast and it's about promoting it more and growing those downloads, then that's a way. Tabitha, is it ever beneficial to do a series of podcast episodes and using it as content on your website? I'm thinking that it would help set you apart and elevate your authority in your field. Well, that's a good question. Doing a series of podcast episodes, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So you could do a series of podcast episodes. So, for example, for you, Tabitha, like it might be around the topic of autism, for example, or maybe it's more general. And I know that you have your agency, so maybe it's about supporting people that are impacted with disabilities. And so, yeah, having a series of podcast episodes, or maybe it's a product-based service and it's a series of podcast episodes, and you can just load them all up onto your website as well, particularly if you've got a lot of, I say traffic, but if you've got a lot of people coming to your website, if you look at your metrics and you've got a lot of people coming there, then putting it on there as well is going to help. If you don't have a website, that's okay. Maybe you've got like a Linktree. So, for example, I've got Linktree and I literally have Voice of Soul podcast. You click on that and it goes to the Apple, and all the podcast episodes are there as well. So it is a great way to repurpose your content, as well as continuing to promote your podcast as well. And if you're a guest on people's podcasts, you can also put that on your website. I know when I had a website earlier on for a different kind of business, I actually had those podcast episodes where I'd been a guest speaker. And just said, podcast episodes, and, had them linked there. So it's definitely a great add-on to have to your website, or if you don't have a website, to pop it on your Linktree or your links and sharing it that way. And when it comes to your podcast, it's important to acknowledge and celebrate each of the downloads, like your first 5, your first 10, your first 20, your first 50, 100, 200, like I'm at 340 now, and I'm like, oh, when I get to 350, and, and continue on from there as well, rather than like, oh, I want to get to 10,000. It's like, yeah, you do, but next step, next step, next step. So celebrating each of those. And as you start to promote your podcast more, you'll be able to see, what episodes are downloading more, or what ones you might want to focus more on for particular communities and audience groups. And remembering to thank those people who have shared your podcast episodes. So the ones that you've reached out to and you've said, hey, can you share my podcast episode in your emails with the community, going back and, leaving a voice note or popping in a text message and thanking them and letting them know that, what impact it has, but actually thanking them for doing so. And asking if there's anything that they would like in return, or how can this relationship be mutually beneficial. Nearly 350 is huge. Well done. Oh, thank you. Yeah, considering, you just keep going, and there's some days I look at my Buzzsprout hosting and go, oh, that just took off. Which is really exciting, and particular episodes. And it's also a great reminder of, some days you might not promote it, or some weeks, and you can go, okay, well, I'll come back to that. So, that's were there any other questions? I know that you asked some questions earlier on, Tabitha, at the beginning of it. Was there anything that you wanted me to go deeper on or address, or something that I may even have missed when it comes to questions? I think there was something around episodes. When it comes to what episodes, you might be like, hey, Amanda, what episodes do I talk about? What are your most commonly asked questions from clients, from inquiries? What did you want to first know when you first started in business? They're your episodes. Start there. What's been your most popular episode so far, and why do you think it's been hit the sweet spot? Yeah, great question. It's actually been my networking podcast, Give to Give. That one is just, I say through the roof, because by my standards it's through the roof. I think it's about 30 plus podcast downloads. It's really, when it comes to the sweet spot, it's interesting. Like, that's actually a pretty cool question. Like, I recorded that episode back in December, and prior to that was when I was really starting to get into networking. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to share what's been working really well for me. And it's almost like that was the acceleration point. So all the things I'd been doing beforehand, in community groups, answering questions, doing lives, meeting people, and then creating that episode, I don't know, that was like the sweet spot where it just compounded, or it just, quantum shifted. It just kind of, if you're looking at a graph, it just, shoots up. There's no linear to it. It just went boom. And that's been my most popular one. Another one too, whilst I'm not into, new age teachings and the spirituality side of things, that particular episode, I still keep it there because, I'm open about that. That does get quite a few downloads as well. But the networking one has been the one that's just really taken off, and it's actually a much easier one to share. I say much easier because it's an area where there's not a lot of social media content on networking in the way of like podcast episodes. Look, there are when you go looking, but it's a topic where if you want to do it the non-traditional way, which is how I do networking, it's more organic. There's definitely structure and flow to how I network. Then that podcast episode is the one that's just taken off, and it's an easy share for people to listen to and to recommend. Mabina, it's very important to celebrate the smallest baby steps of the journey. It gives you courage to move forward. Love your style of explanation. It is encouraging me to start my podcast. Oh, you're so welcome. And yay, starting your podcast. But celebrating those baby steps. Like on my story somewhere on Instagram, if you were to go looking, there's the very first photo of myself. And like I said, I hired a podcast coach of us after our first meeting, and uploading my first episode and everything being approved through Apple. Like, it's capturing those moments. And as I was recording podcast episodes, I was doing it through Zoom. So maybe this is something for you to consider as well, Mobina, and anyone else listening, is that you can start to, take screenshots of like when you've finished your podcasting episode, take a photo. You can share it on your socials, in your stories, and people get that behind the scenes. And particularly as you're growing your podcast, it brings people along in the journey. It nurtures them. And then when you release your podcast, it's a really easy share, but celebrating those small wins and celebrations as well. Absolutely. Hey, Chris, anyone that doesn't have Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Amanda's podcasts are also on Google Podcasts. Oh, thank you. Yes. Thank you for that reminder. Yes, they are too. Yes. Thanks. So yes, they're on Google as well. So Apple, Spotify, and Google, and I think there's some other podcast places it is as well. People go searching for podcasts. So I really encourage you to start your podcast. The strategies that we've spoken about can help you with growing your podcast when it comes to downloads, with networking. Next time you go to a networking event, or you reach out to someone that you're already in touch with, a podcast ask is easy. So go for it. And it's not something that's done a lot of. I know I talk about it a lot, but really passionate about helping you start a podcast and grow your podcast, because as we've seen over the years, podcasting is just growing. People are loving podcasts, are listening to podcasts, are searching for podcasts. It's just going to expand exponential. So get going with it as and when. Tabitha, I love podcasts. I listen to them a lot, and so do most people I know. I think there's plenty of room for more, and I encourage others to go for it. Yes, so many people listen to podcasts while doing life, out doing things, or doing your activities. You're listening to a podcast, and so many other people do as well. They could be driving, could be on public transport, catching the train. You're listening to a podcast episode. It's just so easy. That's what I love about podcasting. So that's another key takeaway. Oh, thank you. So loving this episode. Oh, sorry, I may have got the name mixed up there, but thank you so much. It's so easy, podcasting. It's an easy share. It's an easy form of marketing, of networking. And yeah, that's what I've learned through podcasting, through the journey of podcasting and communicating and refining my podcasting skills, and I'll continue to refine them as well. So yeah, if there's any other questions, pop them up. But yeah, it'll grow your business easily over time. You'll start to see the fruits. You've got to sow bountifully, do your sowing, sharing groups, answering questions, promoting it, all of that. Someone helping you with tech if you need it, but sowing bountifully, and then you'll start to see the fruits of your labor, fruits from the harvest, and it will just grow from there. What are 3 things someone in the audience can do right now to start a podcast on their own? That's a great question. So you want to start a podcast on your own? That's awesome. So there's an app called Audacity. You can start it through there. And 3 things. So yeah, choose an app. You might want to do some research, but choose an app. I assume that you'll have a smartphone or a laptop, so that part's good. So choose an app that works for you. Audacity is one. And with that, a host provider, but I'll pop those in the one. So choose your app and your host provider. And then when it comes to your podcast, what is it that you love helping people with? What are you asked about often? What is your, business? Take the time to explore and journal on it. What kind of podcast do you want to have and be known for in terms of a leader in the industry, and starting your podcast that way. And then deciding if you want to go it alone, as in just start sharing, an episode on a particular topic each time. So the 3 things is, with your tech, get app and a host, and then, decide on the kind of podcast you want in terms of the title and the general kind of content, what it's about, and going from there. Audacity, yes, Audacity team. Yeah, and working out that 3rd step. Do you want to do it alone, or you want to, have guests on, and then focus on your first 15 episodes? Because apparently, I learned this later, after 15 episodes, you're considered a podcaster. So focus on your first 15, even if you're just mapping it out, the first 5, the next 5, the next 5, based on, how they're going. But they're the 3 things: the app, tech, what you want it to be about, and how you want to roll. So on your own, or inviting guest interviews onto your podcast, and just hitting publish, starting. So I'm excited. Like, feel free to come back and, share in the comments or, share with 1111, having started a podcast and what came from it. So, yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for those that are here live. Thank you so much for all your questions, and thanks for those on the replay.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks so much. That was wonderful. Really, so much information in 1 hour. I loved it. I got so much out of that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I can see the comments. People are, thanking you. And we just really appreciate your time and to hear your expertise, because you do this every week or fortnight, right? How regularly do you release?
Up until last year, it was every fortnight. And then at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm refreshing it. So I haven't released any new episodes, but I'm continuing to promote predominantly the business-based episodes.
Yeah. There we are. Mabina says, thank you, Amanda. It was lovely.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it was really insightful. It just goes to show anyone could start a podcast. You don't have to be on camera. You can be if you want to. You can talk about a topic that you're passionate about, which I think is your top priority, because if you're talking about something that you're not so, that's not going to have longevity for you, that's, it could end faster than what you want. So I think that if you're talking about a topic that you love, I think you're onto a winner. I think gotta love podcasts. I listen to them all the time. I love them. I've listened to yours, Amanda. I'm looking forward to hearing other members in Help Me Build My Business Australia. If they start one, we'd love to support you. And so let us know, announce it, let us know, tell us where we need to follow you and follow your podcasting journey. Yeah. So I think that's really it tonight, Amanda. Anything else to add? Anyone else got any last minute questions? I haven't seen anything. I'm just seeing lots of thank yous.
Oh, you're so welcome. And yeah, I'm excited to see what people share and help me build my business around starting a podcast or growing their podcast. Like, let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, let's keep the conversation going, because if this has piqued your interest and you're like, yeah, this is something I want to look into or I want to do, and you've got further questions, I know Amanda hangs out in our group all the time, so just pop it up there, or even come and contact Amanda. Amanda's so approachable. She's lovely. So anyway, let's just wrap it up today. 1111hour.com is the place to go for all your business resources that, like podcasts and things like that. You can support business owners on there, which has been an incredible collaboration with some really great brands. Have a look. And yeah, have a lovely night and enjoy some family time.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Heb. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. Bye.